opportunities is if, like you're saying, it's designed around specific classes at the school. Will these students be able to adjust their schedule to be involved with that as well? And I can see where that would be problematic from an inclusive perspective. And I think if we can get out and get the information to these groups and say, this is when it's available, and they can look at their schedule and maybe adjust it, that might work as well. But if there's something else in addition to that that we need to do, we're more than happy to make this work for everybody on council. That's kind of our goal. One thing that I'm a little bit disappointed in this process, and I'm only joking when I say this, but I am a little disappointed, is that we had two council members that really, really, really wanted to be representatives on this, and I was hoping for a cage match tonight. And
arm wrestling, Clint.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's going to happen or not.
we were really disappointed at that, so.
Maybe next year.
It's not decided yet.
So
Well, I'll leave that to the mayor.
Can we make it dependent upon that?
I will show you my refereeing skills.
Awesome. We can make a cage match as part of the stipulation for this between these two?
yes,
Work extra overtime with the mayor to teach him how to rap. There you go.
There's things about you
That'd
you
be
do
awesome
not
to
know.
get all you guys out there officiating.
But I do think
better than
that
that.
Councilmember Marler's concerns are valid, and we'll definitely address those as we move forward and try and find a way, as we put this together, to reach out to those groups and make that happen. If there's something else we need to do in this process, or if there's a different way you want to approach it, we're more than happy to consider that and go out and look at it and see if we can't make it work, because we want to make sure that this is something that the council really buys into and wants to.
So percentage-wise, what is going to be the refereeing, sports, and recreation side of it as opposed to the council and community projects, of which this group initially was initially proposed to be? I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing is, do you have a ballpark idea, 60-40, 70-30, 75-25?
Are you talking number of people?
No.
Participating?
What are they,
budget.
the refereeing and push towards the sports side of it as opposed to what the council projects, the community projects, that kind of thing?
I guess the way I interpret it as is it's going to be like two separate entities. There's going to be a group of 5 students and Mr. Edson working on the community project that will be more government. And then there's going to be the leadership class that's going to be working with the rec department. The leadership class is still going to be doing their normal activities. They're adding into the refereeing to their class.
So it's going to be two separate deals. Are they going to swap and do a little of each, or is one going to,
No.
5 are going to be community, 5 are going to be
yeah.
sporting sides?
And the
Okay.
reason number 5 was just kind of we're going to start small, or I shouldn't say, Mr. Edson wanted to start small, and then we would look to expand over the years.
Well, I think Lisa brings up a good point. A lot of these current athletes are tomorrow's leaders. Part of what they're learning in their sports is leadership skills, and a lot of them are part of FBLA and all those other groups as well. So, I mean, I think it's two distinctive groups of kids, but I think their ultimate goals are relatively similar as far as becoming better community members and leaders of their communities in the future.
And I guess that's kind of, to answer your question, the idea is to be two separate things, but it's kind of a 50-50 split. One has one focus, one has a different focus. And one of the things that we want to look at, obviously, if we get some really good applicants and Mr. Edson feels good about it, we could expand that from 5 to 10 in the first year, depending, or to 7 or whatever it might be, depending on the applicants. Because, again, we want to be as inclusive as possible, but we also want to make sure it's a meaningful experience for the kids. And so.
And I think once, over the next couple of weeks, once we get the application kind of finalized and how that's going to work, and a schedule and curriculum of the extra duties and meetings at times, I mean, we can reach out to the other schools and the other groups and have something to present to them so that they have an idea of what they're applying for. So
How much ongoing interaction will the city have with these groups? Will there be a city representative at each of the meetings?
Yeah, so the plan I would be the city representative. Clint was hoping to be the council representative, and any additional meetings, and I don't know what the schedule would be at this point, but there would be meetings after school, so forth. Hopefully a field trip at the end, like Jeff was saying, something to the state capitol, and then possibly something for the athletes as well at the end as kind of a reward scenario.
So is the goal, I'm hoping this is the goal. The goal is to get this application out so we get it to these students before the end of the school year, so we are ready to kick it off. the
I think
beginning of
they're
our
hoping
school
to
year.
get it done quickly because registration for next year starts soon, so.
Because even if we take a step off and it's not right perfectly, we're taking a step forward. And so this has been something we have needed for a long time. You know, I've been on council for 6 years. For 6 years, we've been hearing about the importance of youth councils. Even if we go down the wrong path, let's go down a path and
Right.
figure it out make our way as we go. And
Well, you don't know it until you try.
Right.
And if you want to try something new, you can't be scared to do it. I mean, you've got to try it. If it fails, and you change it and you move on to something else. But
no fear.
Make it better each year.
yeah, that's the whole goal, right? To improve and get better with all of our facilities and departments and efforts.
I'm just really excited at the hard work. I know Allie's put a lot of work in this, Clint's put a lot of work into this, you know, and your whole staff have put a lot of work in this. And personally, I want to thank you guys for doing this, because I want people up here in these seats that are currently sitting in the high school that are excited about the concept of becoming a city council person sometime in the future, you know, and being like Kevin said, instead of walking out of there on graduation day going, I can't wait to get out of this town, I want us to start developing leaders that say, you know what, hey, this is a great place to be. Fort Morgan's where I want to be, this is where I want to live, and I want to be part of the process. And this is a very inexpensive step in the right direction.
And you can run for council at 18, so just, you know.
There you go.
And they had that in Sterling not too long ago. They had a young gentleman that was very young, so.
So Clint and Ty, moving forward, my biggest fear is that we won't be inclusive of ethnic minorities, so minorities that aren't represented in other areas of leadership. So I talked to a few staff members when we first started kicking around this idea after the summer, and they mentioned having teachers formally ask particular students that they felt would do a great job but don't get off, often get overlooked for these types of things, to do a personal invitation, like some kind of form, like hashtag you rock, and then have a reason why they think they do a great job, and then have the application attached and give that to 5 students. So just picking different teachers that are good at finding strengths and students that are often overlooked. But I want this to be a group of students who actually represent our entire community, and not just
Diverse.
this little tiny sliver that,
Sure.
they've got the right last name. I want to be a good picture, an accurate picture of the youth in our community. So that's my wish.
It will be an open process. Every student will have an opportunity to apply. We won't just handpick certain students.
Well, access
We're
is
going to-
different, like-
We're going to open it up to everyone, not based on last name.
I think you have to be very careful. I like where you're going with that, but you got to be careful you're not getting into a dynamic, so now you're handpicking who you want on this
Absolutely.
committee.
And that's
So,
something that will not be
I
done.
think it's good that we have teachers. That should be the job of the teachers, to be encouraging students to participate and get involved in things, and counselors. But I think you want to be very careful with, because then you're stacking the deck, you're doing the.
You're giving them an application, Lisa,
Right,
to a
right.
student who might not ever take the chance because a teacher
But I
never
would hope the student
invited them
teachers
to.
are already doing that. I would hope that that's part of what we're doing with our students. I think we have to let go of some of that as a council, because that really falls on the responsibility of the staff and the teachers, and, reaching out to the homeschool parents. But I mean, I think we have to be very careful we're not micromanaging this. I mean, this is a commission that we're doing, but I think if we start getting our hands too far into that, we muddy the waters and we make it, and we look at it. We look at it just like, a year from now, because we're going to have to rebudget for every year for something like this. And if we're not happy, then that's a conversation we have with the school district, with Mr. Edson, with whomever is doing these pieces, and say, hey, that's not really what we had in mind. Let's go back to the drawing board. But I just think we have to be cautious that we're not directing them how to pick the kids.
I agree, especially when they're starting off with just 5 kids. And I'm not sure that you want to push somebody into that role if they're not somebody that is kind of self-initiating and assertive when you're trying to design a program with 5 kids representing 500.
I feel like the main project for the government side of this whole thing this first year will be for them to organize themselves and see how the picture fits for that group. I think the idea is to involve a lot of juniors, and the next year we have those juniors are seniors and they're mentoring the next group of these boys and girls. And, I feel like hopefully we can turn it over to this group of kids and they can kind of help themselves.
So is this
To
going to
set
be a
up how it's gonna
2-year
work.
deal for the group?
I think it's a year-to-year deal, but I think Greg was talking about somehow those juniors,
Juniors would apply for the following.
they'll be there
year.
to mentor the new kids in the future. And I think that's why we were talking about starting with 5 now and possibly growing that number in the next years.
Okay.
But I also think that that's an opportunity if we get to that point and there are some really good opportunities that we can expand that, because I think we do want, I really appreciate all this conversation. I think it's very helpful to give us direction that we want to make sure that we have some cultural diversity representation where possible. We want to reach out. Obviously, we want to be as inclusive as possible, and in this process, we want to make sure that we can come back and report to council that we've taken effective steps to try and address all of these ideas and concerns. Overall, I think I really want to thank the school district and Ty for looking at a way that we could partner together to make this be successful, and that's what we're hoping. And if we go down the wrong road, we're more than happy to fix it. But I think everybody on this council has been very interested in getting the kids involved. So,
Well, I think it's going to be a work in progress for a couple years, and we're going to refine it. If you nail it first year, kudos. But I mean, these things are always
Right.
you'll make them better and better as they go along. So we'll find the places we missed and the things that we've wanted to include or over included. So I think it's a good start and good job with getting this rolling. So I guess at this point, is everybody satisfied on the direction to proceed, move forward? And
Yes, sir.
and we'll come back and report on kind of as we get through the process a little bit further, how many people applied, what applications we received, who we reached out to. I think that's important for an accountability perspective for staff, to be very clear to council what steps we've taken to be inclusive, because I think that's important.
yeah, very important. So
Any other questions?
thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
Thank you for the feedback.
So Clint, you get it by default.
So when's the cage
I'm always
fight?
glad to work with kids.
Victory, Clint.
It's about what's best for kids in the city.
Okay,
It's the Mr.
now we will
Blandmeyer
start
show.
the Glammeyer show. Okay, this next item on the agenda is a public hearing on ordinance 1209, annexing the city of Fort Morgan, that area known as the Fort Morgan Farms 5 annexation. This is a public hearing. Please keep public comments to the issues before the city council. Each speaker is asked to limit comment time to 3 minutes unless a speaker represents a group of citizens, in which event additional time may be allocated. Please respect these limitations, and I reserve the right to limit public comment that is inappropriate under these guidelines or otherwise improper. I also reserve the right to limit testimony or questioning that is repetitive, cumulative, argumentative, or not pertinent to the issues, and to set a limit on the duration of testimony if I determine it necessary in the light of the number of people who have signed up to testify. First is the issue of legal notice. Mr. Brennan, was this hearing properly noticed?
Yes, Your Honor, a legal notice of this public hearing and the full text of the ordinance under consideration appeared in the Fort Morgan Times on April 18th.
Thank you. Next is a presentation of an ordinance by Mr. Glameyer.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I've missed you. I missed you guys at the last meeting, so it's good to be back.
We're going to get a bill tonight.
I'll try to be brief but concise in what we've got before us tonight. So the first item on the agenda is the annexation of Fort Morgan Farms 5. This is 38 acres of property down on the intersection of County Road Q and Nelson Road. It's currently a vacant farm field owned by Robert Graves, Fort Morgan Farms LLC. He bought that property and desires to annex that into the city. You've seen the petition for annexation, and we've taken this through first reading. This is the second and final reading tonight. We did take this to the Planning Commission on April the 9th. They did recommend that you would pass this ordinance tonight annexing this parcel. We did not have any comments for or against at the Planning Commission meeting on this item. We did receive a letter waiving the annexation impact report from the county, so we're glad for that. And we've received no other inquiries or comments about this annexation since I wrote this memo. So staff finds that everything is ready to go and would recommend that you would approve this case 18-012AN, the annexation of 38.702 acres into the city of Fort Morgan. And you would do that by approving the second reading of the ordinance that's in your packet. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on that.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Glameyer on this?
Nope.
Seeing none, would hear public comments if there's anybody who wishes to speak on the issue. Seeing none, I would ask the city clerk if there were any oral or written comments submitted to your office prior to this hearing.
No, Your Honor.
Proceed to council discussion. Are there any questions from the council or discussion?
No, sir.
If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved?
Second.
Got a motion by Lisa Northrup, a second by Kevin Lindell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Council action, Mr. Myers.
As council considers this, you determine whether or not to approve this on final reading, is whether or not this will fit well with the community, if this is how the city wishes to grow, and whether or not overall this makes sense for the community. If it does, go ahead and approve it. If it doesn't, go ahead and deny it.
I would entertain a resolution approving or denying.
Your Honor, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Your Honor, I have a resolution approving second and final reading of ordinance number 1209, annexing Fort Morgan Farms 5 property with authorization to publish by title only.
Second? Sorry, I thought somebody got on there.
Having a resolution by Allison Howe, a second by Lisa Northrup. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
One down. Next on the agenda is a public hearing on ordinance 1210, establishing a zoning district in and upon the lands annexed to the city of Fort Morgan for the said purpose, revising and supplementing the zoning district map of said city for the city of Fort Morgan Farms 5 annexation. Once again, this is a public hearing, and the same rules apply as the previous public hearing. First is the issue of legal notice. Mr. Brennan.
Yes,
Was it
Your Honor,
properly
legal
noticed?
notice of this public hearing and the full text of the ordinance appeared in the Fort Morgan Times on April 18th.
Thank you. Presentation of the ordinance, Mr. Glammeyer.
Okay, so the second and final step when we annex parcels into the city is to zone them, a zone that fits accordingly with the neighborhood. Again, we took this case to the Planning Commission on April the 9th, and they recommended that the council would approve zoning of R2, medium-density residential. This is very similar to the parcel that we annexed on the other side of Nelson Road. It's the exact same zoning, and so it does fit the character of the neighborhood. We did not have any public comment at Planning Commission, and so staff is recommending that you would approve this case 18-012ZO as recommended by the Planning Commission. This would establish R2 zoning medium-density residential, and you would approve that by second reading of the ordinance. It's in your packet tonight. So be happy to answer any questions on this case.
Any questions regarding this?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next, we'll hear public comments. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on the zoning issue? Seeing none, I would ask the city clerk if any oral or written comments were submitted to your office prior to this hearing.
No, Your Honor.
Council discussion. Are there any questions from the council or discussion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved?
Second.
I have a motion by Lisa Northrup and a second by Doug Sawshow. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Council action, Mr. Myers.
All right, council should consider the zoning designation, whether that fits with the area, whether it's in harmony with the comprehensive plan. If it is, then you can approve the zoning. If you believe it's not, then you can not approve this on second reading.
I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I offer a resolution to approve second and final reading of ordinance 1210 establishing zoning for the Fort Morgan Farms 5 annexation and authorizing to publish by title only.
Second?
I have a resolution by Doug Sawshow and a second by Allison Howe. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Next on the agenda is a public hearing on ordinance 1211 annexing to the city of Fort Morgan the area known as the Bath Annexation 1. Once again, this is a public hearing and the same rules apply for instance from the previous ones. First is the issue of legal notice. Mr. Brennan, was it properly noticed?
Yes, Your Honor, on April 18th. Excuse me.
Thank you. Next is presentation of the ordinance by Mr. Glammeyer. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm back. Still here. Okay, this is a little bit more of a complicated annexation. We're actually dealing with 3 parcels of land that are being annexed, and we're doing it in 2 annexations in order to achieve the required contiguity. So the first case you have before you tonight is a portion of a parcel that's owned by Mr. Keith Bath. This is 24.301 acres, so it's a part of the parcel that he owns in entirety. It's interesting, the maps were included in your packet. You can see how the surveyor was creative in garnering their contiguity. So this parcel is bounded really by US 34 on the south, and vacant parcels to the other sides. You did receive an annexation petition for this by the owner and applicant. We did take this to the Planning Commission as well on April the 9th, and they did recommend approval of the annexation. Again, this is the first of 2 annexations needed to achieve the contiguity. The plat you have in your packet actually shows both annexations on one map. And we're going to work with the surveyor to correct that. We'd like to actually have 2 different plats so that we can be able to defend contiguity should we get challenged on that in the future. But for the purposes of the case tonight, you can approve it as it's shown, and then we'll just work with our surveying company to make sure that those boundaries are exactly as they are on that single plat, and then we'll have them produced in 2 different plats and recorded accordingly. Does that make sense? Okay.
Clarification, why are you doing it in 2 parcels rather than all at one?
Well, the state statute requires that you have 1/6 of the boundary connected to the city. And so in order to get that contiguity, we had to split it up so that the first parcel is more of a rectangle. 1/6 of it touches the current city boundary, and then the rest of it's a weird-looking parcel. But when you look at the boundary of that rectangle along with some other boundaries, that you get that 1/6 then contiguous as you continue down the road. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. We did request an annexation impact report from or waiver letter from the county, and we did receive that, so I'm really glad about that. This would have been a really difficult annexation impact report to put together for this one. We received one inquiry, and it was from an adjacent property owner, just making sure that they were not included in the annexation, which they weren't, so that was an easy inquiry to answer. We've worked hard to make sure that all of the requirements have been met, and they are, and so we would recommend approval of this case 18-011AN, which is the annexation of 24.301 acres into the city of Fort Morgan, and you would do that by approving the ordinance that's in your packet tonight. Be happy to answer any other questions you might have on this one.
I want to just point out one thing for full disclosure to the council and the public. With this property in the next the next annexation. We're also working on a development agreement that's just about finished with Mr. Bath and some additions he's putting on his properties. We discussed the last meeting, we talked about being ag-friendly and working with adjacent property that is ag-based in business and everything else. And we're working to finalize some of the points on that final agreement. One of the things, and I want to thank Jenny for doing this, she's gone out and worked with them to understand what their historic use of that property was so that we can set an appropriate limit on certain activities out there, primarily feedlot activities. One of the concerns I think that has come up is we don't want to annex something into the city and allow it to be zoned that would later cause problems to the city. We want to make sure, or residents, we want to make sure that what we provide is what's been going on out there before. So we've worked on that. Initially, the request was for a lot of cows, and and we've spent some time looking at what they've done in the past. They bring in as many as 700 or 800 cows that stays for not until they're finished. I think it's more of a layover period of time when they come in. And I think the maximum amount that they've had in there at any given time is 1,000. Initially, when we got the agreement back, they were requesting 2,000, and that wasn't really what we had understood when we started down this road. But we've worked with them, and I think that he understands that we have to go off of what the historic uses were. Jenny's spent a lot of time to try and figure out what those uses are, and so I just want to make sure that you're aware that we're moving forward with an agreement with him to continue the use of that facility as he has in the past, as opposed to enlarging it. So we've worked through those issues. So.
Okay, next we'll hear public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to speak on the issue? Seeing none, I would ask the city clerk if any oral or written comments were submitted prior to this hearing.
No, Your Honor.
Council discussion, is there any discussion? Council?
You said you're working on the agreement with Mr. Bath. That's already been
Yep.
done
Yep.
before we do this annexation.
Yes, and I think we've got everything kind of hammered out. Just wanted to make sure council understood that we were in that process as we do this. And I think, and I'm not sure, Jenny, you met with Keith and talked about these things, and he's pretty much ready to go with the agreement, which will come at the next meeting. So.
And to be fair, when someone's annexed in, they have a lot of grandfathered rights. You can't annex in and then force them to to change their property in certain ways. And so the development agreement really is just memorializing that understanding, so we have it in writing for both parties moving forward. So things change over 10, 15, 20 years. We want to make sure that it's clear what is considered grandfathered use.
Well, what my thoughts were is before we've encountered problems with odors with neighbors who said that we were here first and we can go ahead and grow. And so I wanted to make sure if we're going to have them annexed that we have the agreement in place prior to that, so.
Yeah, and we've talked about that growing the problem, and that's definitely what we're not doing here. And he understands it's to maintain what he currently has, and if that doesn't continue for I think what's in the agreement, 12 months?
12-month period.
If they stop using it for 12 months, then they lose that. So it's been discussed, and he understands the direction we're going.
You've reached an agreement with him, you know, his word is better than having some signed by a lot of people, so.
Yeah, that's true. And he's been great to work with, so.
Yes. There's no further discussion. I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved?
Second.
I have a motion by Lisa Northrup and Kevin Lindell, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Council action, Mr. Myers.
So I'm more than happy to elaborate, but it would be the same legal
Same as
jargon
before.
as before.
Can I just point out on this one, we're not going to be publishing by title only because some of the legal descriptions have changed since first reading. So we'll be publishing this one, the next one, and then the zoning for both in full again. Just, you can authorize me to publish by title only, but I won't.
All righty. So noted.
That is in the record. I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I offer a resolution approving second and final reading of ordinance number 1211, annexing the Bath Annexation 1 property and authorization to publish in full.
Second?
I have a resolution by Lisa Northrup and a second by Allison Howe, both by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Publish it how you want.
Next is a public hearing on the ordinance 1212 annexing to the city of Fort Morgan that area known as Bath Annexation Number 2. Once again, this is a public hearing and the same general rules apply as the previous hearings. First is the issue of legal. Mr. Brennan, was it properly noticed?
Yes, Your Honor, a legal notice of this public hearing and the full text of the ordinance appeared in the Fort Morgan Times on April 18th.
Next is presentation of the ordinance by Mr. Glanmeyer.
Okay, this one can go a little quicker. This is the rest of these three parcels. It's 111.414 acres. The only difference here is that it's the remainder of Keith Bass property, and then the other two parcels are owned by Rob Graves. This will complete this annexation as required by the statute. Again, the same inquiry was made about this annexation, and everything's in order, so we'd recommend approval of this case as well. And you would do that by adopting the ordinance tonight.
Thank you. Any questions or comments to Mr. Glanmeyer? Seeing none, next will be public hearing. Does anybody wish to speak on this issue? Seeing none, I would ask the city clerk if any oral or written comments were submitted to your office prior to this hearing.
No, Your Honor.
Council discussion. Are there any questions or discussion from council?
No, sir.
Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to close or continue the public hearing.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Council action.
Same as above.
Very good. I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution approving second and final reading of ordinance number 1212, annexing Bath Annexation 2 property and authorization to publish in full.
Second.
Okay, counting down.
You want us to vote?
Yes, please. Have a motion and a second. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Pretty
I
sure
was
John-
checking the exact number of the,
Pretty sure John wasn't going to let us get away
no.
with not
I
voting.
did. And- Next on the agenda is a public hearing on ordinance 1213, establishing a zoning district in the uplands upon lands annexed to the city of Fort Morgan for said purpose of revising and supplementing the zoning district map of the said city for the K Bath annexation. This is a public hearing. All the previous rules and regulations will be enforced. First is the issue of legal notice. Mr. Brennan, has the hearing been properly noticed?
Yes, Your Honor. Fort Morgan Times, April 18th.
Thank you. Next is a presentation of the ordinance. Mr.
All
Glameyer.
right, we're in the final stretches here. Thanks for hanging in there. So this case establishes the zoning for the parcels that we just annexed. Staff is recommending urban agriculture for the parcel that's owned by Keith Bath, and then industrial zoning for the parcels that are owned by Robert Graves. We actually have interested party in the vacant parcels owned by Rob, and so that fits well in the industrial zoning. That's also consistent with the area. We've got the industrial park farther to the south. Keith's property is more of an agricultural, but then we've got the interstate to the north there, and we've got a substation to the west, and so that really fits well in the character of the area. So that's what we're recommending tonight for both of those, or those three parcels. We've received no comments regarding that, and we would recommend approval of both of those cases, and you would do that by adopting the ordinance that you have in your packet. So be happy to answer questions on the zoning of these parcels.
So this is zoning for just the Bath? The first one is zoning for just the Bath, or are we zoning?
This ordinance would zone all three parcels. Keith Bath's parcel would be the urban agriculture, and then 2 parcels owned by Rob Graves would be zoned industrial, but this ordinance takes care of both of those zonings.
Excellent. Consolidation.
Yep.
Cut down on
Yeah.
public hearings.
Are we authorizing to publish by title only or in full?
No, this will be.
We're not there yet.
as well.
This one is still full. Lots of ink.
Makes
Been
the
a
paper
moving
happy.
target on this one with the
It's
issue
a
of the
rule.
contiguity, and we've been back and forth with the surveyor, and so there were some changes at the last minute to make that contiguity work from what we originally anticipated. So kind of really moved this one forward fast for Mr. Bath, and that caused some of these challenges. But
And what's different in this is the annexation boundaries didn't follow the zoning boundaries.
right.
And that's completely different.
Awesome.
We end up in the same place.
Okay.
Just takes a
Any
lot of
other
ink.
questions for Mr. Glameyer?
Okay, thank you.
Next, we'll hear public comments. Is there anybody wish to speak on this issue? Seeing none, I would ask the city clerk if any oral or written comments were received at your office prior to this meeting.
No, Your Honor.
Council discussion, are there any questions or discussion of council? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Council action.
That's the same as previously presented.
Good answer. I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I offer a resolution approving the second and final reading of ordinance number 1213, establishing zoning for the Bath Annexation 1 and 2 properties and authorization to publish in full.
Second.
Have a resolution by Allison Howe, a second by Doug Sashow. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
And next on the agenda is guess. Public hearing for ordinance 1214, amending Chapter 20, Article 6 of the City of Fort Morgan Municipal Code concerning height restrictions. Once again, this is a public hearing, and previous rules and regulations will be enforced. First is the issue of legal notice. Mr. Brennan.
Yes, Your Honor. Fort Morgan Times, April 18th.
Next is a presentation of the ordinance by Mr. Glanmeyer.
All right. Well, I was not here when this case was presented in first reading, and I appreciate Jason carrying that ball forward for me while I was out of town. This is second final reading on an ordinance change to the land use code. We're changing a couple of things in this with this change. One of them concerns the height restriction, and another one changes a special use to a permitted use. This was all predicated on the annexation that we just dealt with for Mr. Bath, primarily. We don't have a lot of urban agriculture in the city, really our tree dump, and now Mr. Bath, and some of our parkland. And so Mr. Bath is expanding his facilities out there. We want to accommodate the expansion. We want to be agriculture friendly in the city, and this is our zone that allows that to happen. And as we went through the zoning, we recognized that there were some limitations to agriculture. And if we're going to have an agricultural zone in the city, then we ought to allow some agricultural operations as a use by right, particularly the grain drying and feed manufacturing. It was a special use permit that we would have to bring forward to you all if we had those types of operations occur. But honestly, in an agricultural zone, you would expect that type of operation to exist. They coexist well in agriculture. That's why you have those types of zones. So we were recommending that we would change that from a special use permit to a permitted use. And then there's the issue of maximum structure height. Currently in the urban ag, that's set at 40 feet. We like having 40 feet in there for certain structures, but we've added a footnote to the table that's in the code that says that the maximum structure height for farming, ranching, and crop production, grain drying, and feed manufacturing uses, such as silos, grain elevators, and similar uses, shall not exceed 125 feet. Really, a grain elevator at 40 feet doesn't work. Silos at 40 feet are difficult to manage as well. Mr. Bath certainly has need for a taller grain silo out there. We recognize that. Again, agricultural uses, that's not uncommon, and we're trying to be agricultural friendly and compatible, and this is the way we can do that. So those are the two amendments that we have before you under the land use code for the urban ag zone, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on that.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Glanmeyer?
It's always good to clean the code up, make it user-friendly.
Yeah, we're finding lots of those. Keep bringing those forward to you. So,
We do have a couple of grain silos in town.
Yep.
So
We do.
okay, thank you.
How tall is Urker? Is that the same
Well,
125?
that's a great question. I don't know the answer to.
I'm just trying to like scale it in my brain.
Yeah.
Because like 40 feet I can totally figure out, but not
40
100.
foot's a power pole,
Okay.
so.
So
3 times
Urker-
that.
Way up.
3 power poles.
3 power poles, well, typically those are 60, so you'd be 180, I guess.
Okay, so we'll get you a measuring tape.
Just for future reference, and in case it would come past a taller with silos at Western Sugar, if they
Those
were to
are-
be annexed into the city.
Pretty tall.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
Hypothetically, yes.
Next is public hearing.
Good point.
Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this issue? Seeing none, I would ask City Clerk if there were any oral written comments submitted to your office prior to this hearing.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. We'll now proceed to council discussion or questions.
No, sir.
We'll now proceed to a motion to close.
So moved?
Second.
A motion by Lisa Northrup, a second by Kevin Lindell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Council action.
So very similar to above, but rather than seeing whether or not this land fits with the city, you're asking yourself whether or not this change in the code is going to be for the betterment of the community. If you believe that it is, then you can pass this. If you believe that it is not, you can either amend it or deny it.
I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I'd offer a resolution to approve the second and final reading of Ordinance 1214, amending the City of Fort Morgan zoning code regarding urban agricultural uses and authorization to the publish by full title,
Second?
By title only.
by title only? Okay.
Basically, however John wants to do it.
Second was by Allison. I have a resolution by Doug Soshow and a second by Allison Howe. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Something new. No public comments this evening. Oh, were you here for that, Mr. Waltham? Next on the agenda is public hearing or public comments or audience participation. Seeing none, we'll have reports by official. Welcome back, Mr. Waltham.
He must sign in. He knows the drill.
Welcome.
Welcome back.
It's good to be back. I've been very busy with music, politics, church, sporting events, planning this, planning that. I've got 5 concerts coming up. I've done 1 already. I've got 4 more to play. Plus dinners, you never mind. Mayor Shaver, members of the City Council, staff, members of the press, and my dear friend, Mr. Laporte. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here tonight to give you something to think about in the November election. I've been watching the last 2 council meetings, and I was coming to the last one, except I had a phone call from State Representative Perry Buck from Bell County, and we talked for about 40, 50 minutes. I know you're going to try to put on the ballot charter changes, at least 4 of them. Okay, but I would do it as quick as possible. Get it on the ballot so the people will, because that way I'll give Mr. Myers a chance to do the legalization of the wording. Now, on the charter change on one of them, which is, to me, is hot, but to me it's a no-brainer, but that's me. I would put every one of those to a vote of the people. But this is what I want you to chew over. You are going to have a public forum on May 29th. Fine. Except, it seemed to me, when you do a public forum and you're dealing with issues, you've got to have both pro and con. Now, when you decide to put these charter changes on the ballot, then that will go into the Blue Book. When that Blue Book is published, let me tell you, the voters in Fort Morgan and Morgan County will read that like a hawk. You may not think so by the way they talk, but I would not be watching the forum, nor will I be here, because I want to hear both sides. The reason I'm going to be undecided on this is because of the way the wording is going to be on the ballot. And Mr. Myers will know, and most of you know, if you voted in the 1976 election, which dealt with the Olympic issue, the people wanted the Olympics in Colorado, but this is the way it was worded. A yes meant no, and a no meant yes. So the people who were for the Olympics voted for it, but actually voted against it. And the people who voted against the Olympics, because they were against it, voted for it. But thank the Lord, we passed an initiative a decade ago to change that language where a yes means yes and a no means no. So I really hope you consider this, because let me tell you about forums. Public forums, you might get a handful, but when you're dealing with the amendments, you're going to get a handful. You're going to get an audience. The Republican headquarters has always been packed with Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, because all they want to know is the pros and cons of the amendments and why we should vote for, why it's necessary. And 2 years ago we had, if I remember right, Wiggins, Weldona, and Brush School Board, all on the ballot. They were all discussed at that same forum. That's when people get excited about learning about the amendments and charter issues, charter changes, not in May. I'm interested because I'm a political animal, but be that as it might. Now, I think Councilman Mahler, you made the comment on the April 3rd meeting how many amendments could be on the ballot. I have been on the internet ever since day one. And there are so far 185 initiatives that have been filed. To me, that's 185 too many. But give you an example, this is what they're looking at. 2, the titles have already been set. And that is transportation funding and also education funding. But I'm going to give you just a list of, not a list, but a few of the amendments that could hit the ballot. Property tax, congressional redistricting, legislative redistricting. Don't ask me why they're on there, but they are. Raising the age from 18 to 21 to buy guns. Lowering the age from 21 to 18 to buy alcohol. Lowering the age to vote from 18 to 21. Dying is even going to be on the ballot again, and I will vote against it if it gets on the ballot. But those are just a few of the issues that are on the ballot. And I'm monitoring these every single day. Mr. Myers, I have a question for you. The voters, I think it was 2 years ago, passed an amendment that required that if an amendment goes on the ballot, they've got to have X amount of percent of votes from each Senate district. Is that correct?
At the statewide level, yes.
Statewide level, yeah. I don't know if that's happened because I haven't seen any activity in Morgan County or even northeastern Colorado.
I don't know.
And is that for constitutional or statutory? I don't know that either.
It's, from my understanding, is any to amend the Constitution.
Well, that would be
That
constitutional.
would be the Secretary of State's office would
Well,
have to do that.
if this is the
enforcement.
case, we shouldn't even have this many on the ballot. But anyway, but I want you to give this some thought, because when the blue book comes out, in there will be all the amendments, and I kind of the whole state's up, plus the amendments, and I don't know how many. We could have as many as 10 to 14. And all the judges will be on the ballot, and there's a mess of those. And so I want you to really think about this hard, ladies and gentlemen. When you're going to have a forum in May, I hope you have 99 people, but I don't know if you will. I would recommend you have a forum when the blue book comes out. Then you can discuss not only the amendments, but also the changes in the charter. And that would give people to have, you've got to have both sides present on no matter what issue. Representative Becker does a wonderful job of presenting why we need it and the arguments for and the arguments against. But this is only fair to the public, and this would be a perfect spot to have it, to discuss the amendments. The Fort Morgan Times and the League of Women Voters used to sponsor it, but since the Spencers are gone, that's null and void. So the GOP takes over, and we have packed houses. So that's just something to think about. I have my opinion, but I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to say I'm going to vote until I see what Mr. Myers comes back with the actual wording. Because let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the wording on these amendments can be very tricky, even though a yes means yes and a no means no. So think about it. And I appreciate Councilman Shoshao. Thank you for your job on the police force. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be back. And don't worry, I'm going to keep track.
Good deal. Thanks, Jerry. Anybody else wish to speak on items not on the agenda? Seeing none. Reports by officials and staff.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you've probably noticed, we're tearing up streets at a rapid pace. We're going to see a lot of our streets department, as we talked earlier in our...
Keep it up, we need the rain.
Yeah, I know. We start digging holes and the rain comes. So we hope everybody will be patient with us on that, and want to thank all of the staff. They're working really hard right now to make sure that we're getting everything done this summer that council wants done. And so we hope we'll get the support of the community as we go through this process. I know people's routes to work might be adjusted a little bit here and there, or to their business might be adjusted here or there, but the end result is going to be some really nice streets and some upgraded infrastructure. So with that, is there anybody else? I know the chief may have an announcement.
Well, we have some good news from the police department. The Justice Assistance Grant Board granted us an $18,615 grant. That's a no-match grant for crime scene equipment. That brings our two-year total from the JAG Board to over $45,000. This money, like I said, will be used for crime scene equipment that will be shared throughout the Northeast region. The JAG Board rates the grants, and our grant, the written grant and the presentation, was ranked the highest in the state for a municipality. So we were excited to be rated that high and to get full funding on that grant.
Very good.
Well, and I would also point out that our police department was assisting many other police departments this weekend with, I don't know if the right way, if it's something you make fun of or not. But anyways, a very serious situation that they handled very well. And one of the things I would point out, you've all seen the news with the semi truck and some of the damage that it did. We've been working for the last couple of years to be prepared for these kinds of incidents in the city of Fort Morgan with training for hostage negotiations, as well as other kinds of situations that involve, I guess, high stress and people running and hiding. We really appreciate the work that our police department puts in to keep the community safe, and also our cooperation with the other surrounding law enforcement agencies. So I know it looked like a mess, but it could have been worse. So, anybody else have any announcements? All right, that's what we've got. Any questions from council? Okay.
Couldn't ask for a better timing on the rain, though, I will have to say. But bids, meetings, and announcements. Mr. Brennan?
Thank you, Your Honor. We've got a couple of bids out right now. The city, is accepting sealed bids for 750 kVA pad-mounted transformers until 2:45 p.m. on May 10th, and MCO 3-yard trash containers until 2:45 p.m. on May 11th. Under meetings, the Senior Center Advisory Board is scheduled to meet on May 8th at 1:30 p.m. On May 9th at noon, the Airport Advisory Board is scheduled to meet at the airport. On May 10th at 4 p.m., the Historic Preservation Board will meet here at City Hall, and the next City Council regular meeting will be May 15th at 6 p.m. here at City Hall. I think Jeff kind of went over, some of you probably saw or experienced the milling on Railroad Avenue today. That is going to start moving into the next phase this weekend. I just got this information today and put this release out, but they're going to start on Thursday by placing a new valve near the intersection of Railroad and Sherman. That is going to cause delays and lane closures while they do that. And then on Monday, they will completely close that intersection for most of the day. Or no, I'm sorry, on Saturday, May 5th. While they go through that intersection with the new water main. And then the project will move west along Railroad, and the detours and everything will move with it. So it's going to be kind of a mess for a while, so we hope people will bear with us. And the last thing is Northeastern Junior College freshman studying criminal justice just wrapped up her internship at Fort Morgan Police Department. She's been working there 1 day a week for the last 5 months. So that was the first intern. They have another one there now.
Is there anything else to come before the council? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.